good morning. Welcome to First Edition, the online ministry of First Community Church. My name is Glenn Miles. I'm the senior minister here in this congregation, and we are thrilled that you join us on this day for this service. We want you to know, no matter who you are or where you're from, what you believe or don't believe, you are welcomed and accepted here as you are. Right now, there's a QR code on your screen. Take a moment, would you please, to capture that link, click on it, and then let us know of your attendance, of any prayer concerns you might have, and you can even share in the offering if you choose to do so. We'd love to hear from you. My message today is inspired by three different sources. The first one is the story of Ruth and Naomi in the Old Testament. It's a marvelous story of companionship and a willingness to stay together despite how difficult their lives are. The second one comes from the book of Ecclesiastes, where an old ancient preacher of wisdom discovers that life is better together than separate. And then third, the old movie from 1954, titled White Christmas, essentially makes the same point, that when we work together, we can find our way through anything and help each other at the same time. I really enjoyed this message. I'm looking forward to sharing with you. And I also want you to know we have a couple of great pieces from our children's Christmas musical. I know that you're going to enjoy this day. Let's worship together.
There's a story and you're in it. I need you to walk with me for a minute. There's something to tell you. I've got something to say. You may find yourself on the center stage or standing all alone in another place. But if you're living for your glory, then your story's gonna fade away. Come and listen, come and listen, come and listen, come and listen. There's a story that surrounds us, even angels are singing in the chorus. It's not all about you, and it's not about me. The royal king who was born in humility, carried your love to humanity, and was to recognize his glory, show us how to live the story today. Come and listen, come and listen, come and listen, come and listen. Come and see what God has done. The one who recognized his only son. Come and listen, 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 come and
I'm pleased to introduce Brad and Abby Jo and Noel and Gloria to light our Advent candle, please. Thanks, you guys.
In a weary and worn world, how do we begin again? Where do we start?
Let us begin together. Let us begin arm in arm. Let us begin by holding each other up instead of tearing each other down. Let us begin with words of peace.
Yes, let us begin with peace.
Today we light the candle of peace. May these lights remind us of what could be. May these lights mark a new beginning. May peace flow like a river, and may it start with us.
Arm in arm, hand in hand, side by side, may we begin again. Amen.
So in December of 1990, it was the second Sunday of Advent, and I was the preacher for the day. My boss back then, some of you may remember his name, was Dick Wing, senior minister here for 23 years. In fact, he left San Diego and came here to be senior pastor. And it wasn't because he was working with me, just so we're clear about that. Anyway, it's my turn to preach, and I don't remember the text, I don't remember much of the content, but I remember a major mistake I made in the middle of the sermon. I'd gotten through, and I was almost to the end, and I was using the Christmas carol, White Christmas, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, as an illustration of my sermon. And I quoted the carol. I didn't sing it, of course, but I quoted the carol, and I talked about how God invites us to dream at this season. It's a season to dream and to imagine what our families might be like if finally the promise of Christmas could be true, that there could be peace on earth. If not maybe peace on earth, at least peace in our families. You can kind of see where I'm going with that illustration. And then, this wasn't in my notes, it just popped into my head, which has forever been assigned to me not to speak about whatever pops into my head. It just popped in my head, so I needed to say, by the way, that the movie White Christmas, where it was first presented by Bing Crosby, is a terrible movie. No one likes it. It's corny and cheesy and awful, and the whole room. Now, think about this. Think about where I am. That movie has a military context. It opens with a scene of Bing Crosby singing White Christmas. We're going to see it in a minute. Singing White Christmas in this battle zone. And it ends with the general I hope I'm not spoiling it for you, it ends with the general being honored by his men on Christmas Eve 10 years later. It's actually a pretty sweet movie, but I'd seen it as a cynical high school kid. I thought it was a cheeseball, waste of time. Plus, not only that, where am I preaching? San Diego. There's like a gigantic naval base in San Diego. There's a Marine Corps depot in San Diego. Up the road a little bit up the road. Where it's like what? I just went blank. Anyway, up the road, there's another Marine base. It's just great. Oceanside, thank you. It's just a lot of military folks around. I would guess 2/3 or more of the members of the church were in the military, had served in the military. There were veterans of World War II who were in that church. And when I made that comment, the whole room, you just kind of murmured a little bit, the whole room went, ugh. And then everybody kind of goes like this. And they just sat back, and you know how when you're kind of ticked at somebody, you just kind of look at them sideways? Imagine 300 people doing that to me. Well, as soon as I said those words, I knew I'd messed up. I tried to stumble around and say, well, it wasn't really that bad, but then I quickly moved on, got to my conclusion, and was finished. When the service was over, I did like I always do. It's 11 o'clock service. I hadn't added that little dumb thing at the 9 o'clock, but at the 11 o'clock, I'd added it in. Went to the door, and I shook hands with people. Most of the folks were being pretty funny. You really stepped in it was probably the main comment I heard. It kind of gave me a bad time and that sort of thing. One of the persons who came through was Gene. Julie remembers Gene. He was a former chair of the board. He was a retired school superintendent for San Diego schools. He was a great athlete at San Diego State, played basketball and football, was an all-conference athlete, super great guy, extremely smart, and also one of the most foul-mouthed persons I've ever met in my life. He was the board chair who had hired me 3 or 4 years before and brought me on there, helped Julie find a job with court-appointed special advocates. Great guy, but he was the last one through the line. He just went, I hope you learned your bleeping lesson, Mills. He always called me Mills. He never learned my name the whole time I was there. I hope you learned your bleeping lesson. That was the bleeping dumbest thing I've ever heard a bleeping preacher give in my bleeping life. You know what I said back to him? You're bleeping right. Yeah, that was a huge mistake, because after all, what's this movie about? It's about friendship. It's about community. It's about standing side by side. Here's one of the stories I heard a couple of days later from a man who was a veteran in the church, had fought not in the Navy but in the Army. He'd fought at the Battle of the Bulge. His name was Joe. He's about this tall, about 5'6", maybe 5'7" if he stood up tall. Tough guy though. You didn't mess with Joe. Joe came up to me at the church a couple of days later and said, I know you got some grief about that. I hope you learned your lesson. But he had tears in his eyes. And he said, I bought a VCR 10 years ago, and I bought that movie on VHS, and we watch it every year. And it's so meaningful to me to sit and watch that movie with my grandparents, or with my grandkids, and tell them, yeah, this is what it's like sometimes when you're like this in battle, when your only buddy that you care about is that guy right next to you. It's a beautiful film. It's a little cheesy, a little corny, but it's really actually good cheese and good corn. And it's about Christmas. Let's watch one of the opening scenes.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, just like the ones I used to know, where the treetops glisten and children listen to hear sleigh bells in the snow. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas, with every Christmas card I write. May your days be merry and bright, and may all your Christmases be white.
To set the scene there, that's Major General Waverly, who was the commanding officer of the 151st Division, according to the story. This is the story from the movie. He's been reassigned to a new division. The men loved him. They really admired him. He was tough and fair, and there's a song you'll hear later on that says they'll follow the old man wherever he wants to go, and it's really who they see him. They are with him. They'll fight for him. They'll fight for the guy on their left and the guy on their right. He kind of sneaks in there at the end to let them know that he's been reassigned, but you saw him tell all the soldiers to remain seated, not to salute him. He just wanted to hear Bing Crosby sing that iconic song. Did you notice, though, in the crowd, how many of the soldiers were looking at Bing Crosby sing? What were most of them doing? Their heads were down. It's almost like they're too afraid to dream. I heard a member of my church in Atlanta once tell me, he fought in Vietnam. He flew helicopters. He was the guy who would fly into what they call hot zones, and he would fly in and get guys out of there who were caught up in a firefight. You can imagine he had some pretty tough times. In fact, his name was Jim. Jim just died just a few months ago. A wonderful man. I was a leader in the church in Atlanta. He said, Glenn, every time I'd fly into that, I just would assume I was going to die. And when I got home and I wasn't dead, I'd thank God. That's the only way I could do it. I'm just going in. I got to get my buddies if I can. If I don't make it, I've given my life. Every one of those guys has something like that in their heads. They're looking down at the ground. They can't even begin to dream. But that's part of the power and the beauty of this movie is how much strength and courage we find from each other. How much power there is in the community. Not just in the military, but in your workplace, in your family, hopefully in your church. There's something about sitting together with each other which gives us the courage to do whatever we need to do. You know, there's a scene not long after the solo here by Bing Crosby where they come under attack. You can hear the bombs in the background. Well, they get pretty close and it explodes. One explodes near a wall, and Danny Kaye reaches out and pulls Bing Crosby away from that wall and saves his life, which then Danny Kaye uses throughout the movie to tell him, remember when I saved your life? But it's also kind of a little precursor of what's going to come later on in the movie, which we'll talk about that when we get to the end of the sermon, that somehow we're better together. We're better together. And we find strength. There's more strength between two people than one person and one person separated and not working together. It's a foreshadowing, that scene is, of what happens later on. And that seems obvious and simple, I know, but this has actually been part of sacred scripture for thousands of years. The text that Seth read a moment ago was from Ecclesiastes. Anybody know for a free piece of pizza what the name of the author of Ecclesiastes is by tradition? Anybody know who that might be? It's the name Koheleth. It's a Hebrew word that means to gather together, one who gathers in assembly. A kahal is the verb form of that in Hebrew. It's also related to the word ecclesia, which is Spanish for church. Yeah, for church. It's a word that we sometimes translate as church. He's sometimes called the preacher. Koheleth said, what did he say? Two are better than one. Now, he was writing about 400 years before Jesus. He was writing at a time of terrible turmoil. They'd been in exile forever, 3 or 4 generations. The temple had been destroyed. Many of the people have come back to Judea. It's not like it used to be. Everyone's upset, and you can kind of see where Ecclesiastes would be written at that time. Look, life's hard. You're going to die. In the meantime, enjoy life. Enjoy each other and be together. It's not exactly the happiest book in the Bible, but there's some truth. There's some great truth in there. Two are better than one. Sometimes it's read at weddings. It's okay. It's not a bad wedding reading, but it's not about romantic relationship. Although, did you hear later in the text where it said something about how are we going to stay warm at night if you're just sleeping by yourself? Maybe there's some romance happening there, I suppose. That may be part of it. But actually, Koheleth is inspired by something called the Epic of Gilgamesh, which came out 2,000 years before him. So 2600 BC or so. The Epic of Gilgamesh, essentially, one of its themes is the same thing. Gilgamesh, who's sort of a hero, a weak hero, like all real heroes are. He's not perfect. And the gods see that he needs a friend. And they prepare for him and send him a friend so that he can have somebody to work with, work together with. They can find strength together. There's another similar story in the Bible. It's the story of Naomi and her daughter-in-law, Ruth. Do you know this story? Some of you know this, recognize this story? Naomi is a Hebrew woman. She has 2 sons. She's married. Her 2 sons marry 2 Moabite women. Now, you have to be a Bible nerd like me to know how amazing that is. Because if you've just read through the Bible and you've read the book of Judges, who are one of the peoples that the Hebrews are constantly fighting with? Moabites. And there's all kinds of ugly, nasty things that are going on throughout the whole book of Judges where they're cutting and slashing and killing and burning. And that's just the milder version of it. Then we get to Ruth. And all of a sudden, here's this Hebrew woman with 2 sons, married to 2 Moabite women. Her husband dies, though. Her 2 sons die. And the 2 daughters-in-law, Orpah is one, and Ruth is the other one, follow Naomi to return to her homeland. She's from Bethlehem. She stops on the road and says, no, you need to go back. You don't go with me. Go back to Moab. Go back to your people. I can't take you with me. Orpah does, but Ruth refuses. And there's that great line. This is sometimes heard at weddings too, but it's really not about weddings. It's about friendship and companionship and willingness to stand with the other. Ruth says to Naomi, where you go, I will go. Where you live, I will live. Your people shall be my people. Your God will be my God. And they return home. Now, I don't have time to get into all the whole story. She eventually meets a man named Boaz. Boaz is the son of Rahab. Anybody remember who Rahab was? Rahab was she was a prostitute from Jericho who helped save the people when they encountered Jericho, all of that. There's a whole story there, of course, too. Boaz and Ruth fall in love. And the way the story is told is fascinating as well. Again, I don't have time to get into that, but just imagine some wild stuff going on. Anyway, they have a baby. And their other babies, they end up being the great-grandparents of King David. And Ruth is also named in the genealogy of Jesus. The fascinating part to me is how all these connections are at work here in this. That journey for Naomi and Ruth to Bethlehem had to be a difficult one, though. Just backing up a bit. It had to be a difficult one. Think of the pain. Think of the sorrow. I mean, Ruth, no doubt, is in deep sorrow. She's a young widow. Her mother, Naomi, has lost 2 sons and her husband. In fact, they're so overwhelmed that when they show up in Bethlehem, Naomi tells all of her friends, my name is now Mara. Tradition says that name in Hebrew means what? Anybody know? Bitter. you can imagine, right? She's lost her husband, her sons. No visible means of support. Call me bitter. What's beautiful about the text there is that Ruth says nothing. She doesn't pat her on the back. She doesn't say, it's okay, you're going to get through this. I'm here with you. We're together. No nonsense like that. It's a great lesson. If you have a friend, a loved one, somebody who's going through a hard and difficult time, silence. If you don't know what to say, good. Because silence is the best. Julie and I have a friend in Kansas City, a dear friend. We hear from her 3 or 4 times a year. Her son and our son were great friends in the youth group at the church. Still are great friends. She lost her husband about 15 years ago. And about 3 or 4 years after he died, and they'd been married 40 years, deep, passionate love story between the two of them. About 3 or 4 years after she lost her husband, a friend of hers at church, somebody who's still a friend of mine too from that church in Kansas City, came up to her afterwards over coffee out in the narthex and said, you just got to get over this. I mean, I know your husband's been gone for 3 years, but it's time to get over it. You've got a great life ahead. You're young still. You're vibrant. You're alive. Our friend turned on this other one and said, how dare you tell me that? The only thing I'm holding on to right now is my grief. That's all I've got. I love my husband dearly. And I'm going to hold on to the grief that's there. She came to see me and told me that story and asked me if I agreed that she did the right thing. I said, did you hit her? She said, no. Good, then you did the right thing. And in fact, that friend did an amazing thing. She came back to our friend and said, I can't believe how out of place I was. You see, sometimes being a friend and being a companion means you don't say anything. It means you just sit next to that person and you're just there and you just love them, and you love them by your presence, and you love them by whatever aura you're putting out, and you don't have to say any words or put anything else out there. It's a difficult journey for Naomi and Ruth back to Bethlehem, which reminds me of another difficult journey, one undertaken by Mary and Joseph. And why is it difficult? Well, it's a strange birth that hasn't happened yet, a strange pregnancy. It's a strange relationship. She tells Joseph all this stuff that's happened to her. And if you've read the Gospel of Matthew and the story of Jesus' birth and all that, from Matthew's perspective, Joseph says, okay, he was a righteous man, a good man. He decides he's going to give her a note and send her away. He's read the Hebrew Bible, what our Jewish friends would call the Tanakh or the Torah. He knows there's a section there that says, if your wife commits adultery, you can just write her a note and send her away. He's just going to write her a note. And then he has a dream that night. And in that dream, he hears God's voice or an angel's voice, or maybe in my interpretation, he's hearing his own voice. And he decides that bumper sticker that you might still see out there sometimes, the one that says, the Bible said it, I believe it, that settles it. Have you seen that before? Have you heard somebody say that to you? Yeah, that's BS, and I don't mean Bible school, just so we're clear. Joseph understands that. No, I'm going to see this situation through the eyes of God. I'm going to dream with God, that God is at work in this. And what does he do? He believes Mary. Maybe something our society could do more of these days. Believe the woman. He believes Mary. And they undertake that difficult journey. Who knows what scandal followed them? Who knows what whisperings were happening? They undertake that difficult journey where they have to go to Bethlehem to take care of their taxes. By the way, just a Bible trivia aside here. How did they get there? How did Mary get there? From Nazareth to, what did we say? A donkey. Somebody said a donkey. Somebody said they walked. Somebody else said, well, I heard a camel out there. The answer is no one knows, just so we're clear. The answer is no one knows. Julie added a bull that she painted and designed herself to our manger scene, to our creche at home. And I said, there's no bull in the manger scene. What are you doing? And she's like, you read the Bible, you know that doesn't say what animals are there. So we now have a bull. I'm going to add Yoda and some other things to our manger scene. It's a difficult journey, but one they know they can do together. Really, since the beginning of time, since the Gilgamesh epic, 4,500 years ago. And then that wise old Hebrew, that preacher named Koheleth. And then Naomi and Ruth, Joseph and Mary. Through their willingness, let's just say it, through their courage, to stand up and face up all that's going on in their world, they find a way together through the pain, through the anguish, through the fear, to create a new family. A family that eventually leads to Jesus, to one who changes the world. One of the reasons this is so important is that social disconnection can be so difficult on us. I did a little bit of reading about this week, and I found an article in the New York Times that said that social disconnection is actually at epidemic levels. This is one of the researchers that they quoted. Loneliness is at epidemic levels. And we can blame a lot of things. We can blame the internet, we can blame cable TV, we can blame children's sports, we can blame whatever, all those things. But whatever the reasons, it's an epidemic in our culture, in our society. People are feeling separated, lost, alone. According to this research, people who are caught up in loneliness or overwhelmed by loneliness, that has an effect not only on their mental state, but on their physical being as well. They say that being lonely all the time has the effect of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Now, don't go out and smoke some cigarettes. Unless there's somebody that you're going to smoke them with. Then I guess maybe it counterbalances. Viktor Frankl, you remember the Holocaust survivor? He came up with this idea called tragic optimism. That there's three tragedies in life. The first one is pain. Bad things happen to good people. Don't raise your hand, but I'm pretty sure I know a lot of you. I know a lot of you had some bad things that you didn't deserve. Bad things happen to good people. Pain comes. The second tragedy in life is guilt. In other words, dumb decisions we make, foolish things we've done or said, like saying to a group of military veterans, White Christmas was a really dumb movie. The third one is loss. Everything, everyone we love, we will eventually lose. And what Frankl says is embrace that, expect that, and allow those three tragedies, not to just pretend like you're happy and peppy, doesn't matter, everything's great. No, but allow those three tragedies to then shape who we are and who we become and how we face the world, no matter what it is that's happening to us. The movie White Christmas knows this as well. By now, it's the end of the movie. Bing Crosby and Danny Kaye have met these two singing sisters who have this nice little act, and they're really good, and there's kind of a romantic thing happening between the two couples as well. And so they find out that the two sisters are the act at a ski lodge in Vermont. They're down in Florida, they're catching a train, and Danny Kaye and Bing Crosby invite themselves to go with the two sisters. One of the sisters is Rosemary Clooney, played by Rosemary Clooney, who is the aunt of, hey, very good, you read People magazine, okay, cool. I looked it up on the internet, found that today. They take this long train trip all the way up to Vermont, and what's happening in Vermont? There's no snow. There's no snow. The lodge is struggling. No one is coming to stay in their lodge. They don't know how they're going to make ends meet, how they're going to get from one day to the next. Who owns and operates the lodge? Their general from the war, General Waverly. And they're really concerned about him. What are they going to do? Well, they come up with this scheme where they bring all of their performers they know from New York City up to Vermont, and then Bing Crosby goes on. In the movie, it's called The Ed Harrison Show. It's a takeoff on the Ed Sullivan Show. Some of you might remember from way back in the day. And on the Ed Sullivan Show, he performs and does some stuff. The people back in Vermont, General Waverly loves to watch the Ed Harrison Show, but they get him away, do a goofy scheme to get him away, and then Bing Crosby comes out in his character, and he says, hey, to all the 151st guys out there who are watching, General Waverly needs us. I know it's going to be Christmas Eve tomorrow, but if you can meet us up there in uniform, it'll be a great way to help him, surprise him, and encourage him. And so they do. They show up, they're all there. Waverly doesn't know it, but then he's brought in and he sees his men. Put that on the screen, let's watch it.
Stand hut!
Jeeps are ready for inspection, sir.
It's a sweet moment in the film. It's near the very end. I've watched it 3 times this week. I get tears in my eyes every time. This is my pay. I'm being paid back for that comment 34 years ago at University Christian Church in San Diego. The movie isn't. It's a classic. It's a classic Christmas movie. It's wonderful, and they know what we know, what people know at a much deeper level, how much we need each other, how much we need the Spirit of God and the Spirit of the community to work together and in cohesion. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes we put the sails up and God's Spirit is blowing somewhere else. Sometimes we find ourselves in disagreement or in disarray and things don't always line up well. But at the end of the day, you know, I know, 2 are better than 1. Amen.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to I Hope Live. When you need a little hope, hope. When you need a little life, life. When you need a little love, love, love. You need a little love, love, love. When you need a little hope, hope. When you need a little life, life. When you need a little love, love, love. You need a little love, love, love.
I'll be there in a hurry, yeah. You don't need to worry.
We're gonna let the light shine. We're gonna let the light shine.
Come and spend the day with me. Dance around and let your soul go free.
I hope you believe. Yeah, yeah. When you need a little hope, hope. When you need a little life, life. When you need a little love, love, love. You need a little love, love, love. When you need a little hope, hope. When you need a little life, life. When you need a little love, love, love. You need a little love, love, love.
Life is what you make it. And when you have a bad day, you gotta pick yourself
Up again. Pick yourself up again.
You're made for more than what you know right now. We are here to help you see somehow.
I hope you believe, yeah, yeah. When you need a little hope, hope. When you need a little life, life. When you need a little love, love, love. You need a little love, love, love. When you need a little hope, hope. When you need a little life, life. When you need a little love, love, love. You need a little love, love, love.
I hope you're ready for a great show. I hope you're ready for more than a show. I hope you're ready to go back in time to the night that changed the world. I hope you're ready to see how you can change your world. So, without further ado, welcome to the I Hope Christmas Spectacular!
You believe, yeah, yeah. When you need a little hope, hope. When you need a little life, life. When you need a little love, love, love. You need a little love, love, love. When you need a little hope, hope. When you need a little life, life. When you need a little love, love, love. You need a little life, life, life. You all need a little hope, hope, hope. We need a little hope.
Thank you for joining us today for worship. I trust that you were inspired by the message and also by the children's musical. Weren't the kids great? You know, something has been happening here at First Community in recent months. We're seeing our in-person attendance increase by quite a bit, up 20% over last year. We're seeing all sorts of ministries and missions take hold in our community and around the country and even in other parts of the world. There's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement. We'd love for you to think about joining us in person if you're able. And also, if you would, take a moment. There's a QR code up on your screen right now. You can capture that link, register your attendance, submit a prayer concern, and I'd really like you to consider making a financial gift. As you can imagine, it takes a good deal of income to support all the many things that we do in the life of this church. We'd love to hear from you. We're certain the Spirit of God is at work here, and we want